If you had to be placed in a saw trap, which one would you choose? Alright guys, here it is. Reviewing saw traps based on survivability, final part, part 2, the final chapter, final part, poo, the final splatter. In this video, I'll be ranking and reviewing traps from Spiral and Saw X, based on how survivable they are, in my opinion, from child's play to absolute bogus. If you're interested in the other 8 movies, I talk about them in these 3 videos. Okay, for the final time until the inevitable Saw 11, let's drop in. Here we are at Spiral, the one and only worst movie in the series. And the weirdest part to me is that for a film with Samuel L. Jackson and Chris Rock, this feels so shockingly amateur. Like a straight to Gooby original. Like I kinda can't believe this got a theatrical release. So this film opens up with the tongue train. Alright, chill out, Dr. Freaky. This guy wakes up in the subway and he's got a bolt through his tongue. So he's gotta rip it out of his mouth if he wants to escape the oncoming train. He does not. They use a new Saw voice in this, which I appreciate the attempt. I mean, how long can you go on using Tobin Bell's voice when John Kramer has been supposedly dead for how many years? But what they went with just sucks. It's not scary, it's not memorable, it's just this weird, like, text-to-speech computer voice.
Hello, Detective Boswick. I want to play a game.
It sounds like a constipated young woman, and it's just not effective at all. Anyway, I don't know. Rip your tongue out, not impossible. He's on a raised surface, so all he really has to do is jump off and let gravity do its thing. As much as it would absolutely suck, I have to say, survival possible. Then, after about 40 minutes of bad police procedural, horribly unnatural dialogue written by what I can only assume are the whitest writers of all time.
Hey, what are you telling me about women, young motherfucker? Shit.
Terrible ADR.
Women cheat too. It hurts.
Pointless oneers, lazy jump scares, insane line reads.
Fuck you!
And a trap that you don't even get to see play out. We get to the finger trap. This character is sat in a bathtub with Chinese finger traps on all of their fingers. He has to bite down, which will cause the trap to pull off all 10 of his fingers. He has to do this before the water rises to a point where there's an exposed wire which will electrocute him. Jesus Christ, man. First off, death by electrocution has to be one of the lazier ways to do a kill in a movie like this. It's so easy to just have the actor like, maybe I'm nitpicking, but it's just not that interesting to me. But the thing that actually pissed me off hella about this trap is that the guy goes for it. Essentially from jump. He almost immediately starts biting down and letting all of his fingers get ripped off. And he never lets up. So how does he lose? Was this one even possible? Do you have to know the speedrun tactics going in? Nah, this one's absolute bogus. Now we have the wax trap. The police chief here is so unbelievably incompetent at not getting caught and getting put in a trap. She walks into evidence, sees the perp, then instead of pulling her gun, she immediately tries to run out of the room, instantly just taking her eyes off of them so they're free to do whatever. Then she obviously gets locked in the room. Then she decides to take her gun out and starts shooting point blank at a metal door. I don't know, ricochet much? Anyway, the trap here, to me, reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes jigsaw traps interesting. The trap is that hot wax gets dumped on your head, and to stop it, she has to lean back into a knife that will sever her spinal cord at her neck. Okay, so die or die. The best saw traps feel like an actual feat of engineering that's kind of tangible and made by a sadistic genius. When I look at this, I wonder how this is even a trap that was built. How the hell would the blade know that the spinal cord has been severed? And how in turn would that cause the hot wax to stop from being poured? It just feels like magic and you're not supposed to think about it. Whatever, I'm calling this one bogus. It's dog shit. Just f off. Shooting glass. Chris Rock wakes up chained to a pipe with a handsaw and we get that classic needle drop. But then he just gets out and the real trap starts playing. What was the point of that? I swear that was one of the laziest attempts at fan service I've ever witnessed. So this dude's cuffed here by the wrist and then bottles fall into this gizmo which turns it into glass that shoots out of it. It's a real thingamajig. And Chris Rock runs around trying to figure out how to release him. So the key is in this trash can, which seems to be the only thing in the room and is part of the puzzle, I guess. But Chris Rock just doesn't do anything for so long. He could climb up and knock the exposed bottles down so they won't go in. He could hold the trash can up over the chute so the glass can't shoot out. But nah, I'm calling this one easy. But yeah, the whole premise of this trap just feels so lazy to me. Like, did they just go with the first thing they thought of? I don't know. The final trap of Spiral is some insane bogus. So Samuel L. Jackson here, Chris Rock's dad, is hung up with needles draining his blood. This guy's the Jigsaw copycat of this film. He tells Chris Rock that he only has one bullet, which he can use to either kill him to get revenge or to shoot this target that will release his dad. So Chris Rock does that and then runs after the guy and beats him up a little bit. However, when the cops show up, it triggers this marionette thing that hoists up Samuel L. Jackson and then tries to make it look like he's pointing a gun at them. So then every cop there just unloads their entire machine gun clip into him. So what was the trap? Was Chris Rock supposed to free him with the target and then realize what was going to happen and then try to stop the cops from shooting him instead of running after the guy to beat him up? Like, I don't know what he was supposed to do. It kind of makes no sense. Also, these cops are so trigger happy that I feel like if Chris Rock stood in front of Samuel L. Jackson and screamed no, they would just start shooting through him. Like, did these cops not see the giant wires holding him up? Imagine you walk into this room. Would your first thought really be, oh my God, there's a guy in here pointing a gun at us? I don't even know what to rank this one, dude. This is just pure dog shit. Saw X is such a breath of fresh air and a much needed shot in the arm that is the Saw franchise. If they continue to make movies going forward, everyone will look back on this and say this is the movie that saved the sinking ship. If this movie was a failure, I genuinely think this would be the last one. I mean, like 3 strikes, you're out. But what's so good about it? For one, it actually feels like a real movie. This actually feels like someone had an idea for a Saw movie and then made the movie, rather than a studio saying, oh, we need another movie in this franchise. Let's get a screenwriter and a director for hire. That said, as much as I love the professional and competent quality of this movie, I'm definitely gonna miss some of that insane, unintentional humor of the first 7 movies.
I know it's you, you son of a bitch!
Larry.
Hallie? But with Saw X, we enter a new chapter. First, we have the eyeball trap. And for the trap that's on the poster and in all of the marketing, I'm a little bit bummed out that it's not real, but it's just John Kramer's daydream. But if we look at it as though he built it, the player has to turn a dial 4 times, breaking 4 fingers before his eyeballs get sucked out of his head. In the movie, the guy dramatically turns it a couple times, but then just can't keep going. And we get to see the ramifications of that, and it's quite the sight. If you're like me, your first thought would be to just turn the damn thing all the way to the end off jump, just like ripping off a Band-Aid. So this one will be getting a doable from me. Although it is a dream sequence, I would prefer him building this trap for me as opposed to many of the other ones he built. The real traps of this movie are here to punish the people that scammed John Kramer with this fake life-saving cancer treatment. So it's definitely nice to get some Saw victims that actually deserve it. You know, at least a bit more than the many abuse victims, drug addicts, and hooky players. Pipe bomb arms. Here, Jigsaw has the taxi driver slash surgeon with pipe bombs strapped to his arm. And in his grippers, 2 scalpels are duct tape. Anyways, he gets 3 minutes to cut through his flesh to remove the pipe bombs from his arm. The man realizes he has no choice, so he starts to cut away. There's also this moment where John looks away when things get too gruesome, like, oh, Jesus. You did this! You don't get to look away like you can't believe what you're watching? Okay, but on the real, how useful is the arm you first cut into gonna be to cut into the other one? You're cutting into that arm willy-nilly, like any tendons there that control your wrist or fingers are cut. I know the scalpel is duct taped into his hand, but I still feel like you need a little bit of pressure and control to get these things off of you. But hey, good for this guy. He manages to pull it off. The question is, what would Jigsaw have done if this guy didn't survive? He uses him to get information on all the other people that helped with the treatment scam, so he definitely needed it. I mean, if he failed this trap, the credits could have rolled right there. Either way, in my opinion, the pipe bomb arms is definitely pushing it, but I will say it's not impossible. Now we get into the meat of Saw X, if you know what I'm saying. And would you look at that, good old Amanda is back. Yippee! But the most disturbing thing about this movie has got to be that haircut. Anyway, Jigsaw has all of the scam artists and Gabriella locked up in this room together as they go through their specific traps one by one. We start with Valentina. Okay, so remember in the original movie where the dilemma that the characters faced was, would you cut off your own foot to escape with your life? And the characters essentially struggle with that throughout the entire length of the movie. Well, here, Valentina is given 3 minutes to saw through her entire thigh and suck the bone marrow out of her femur. The most absurd thing about this is that she does it. Yeah, she takes a little bit bit to hesitate, but okay. She saws off her entire leg and then begins to fill up the jar, but she just wasn't quick enough. Unfortunately, she just didn't have enough of her bone marrow on the scale before the time was up, so she gets her head chopped off. And John has the absolute gall to turn around and say,
"We don't kill."
Valentina died because she didn't have the will to live.
"You've got to be kidding me. You've got to be pulling my leg." I would get the bone marrow thing if this was a trap like many of the other ones where John's not actually there. Something needs to happen to prove that she really went through with it that can then disable the trap. But John's there. He watched her saw her entire leg off firsthand. The most he could do is walk up and be like, "Damn, you did that shit." And that's why this trap is pure, unadulterated, absolute bogus. I also wanted to mention that the production quality of these effects are so incredible that one of my friends that came to the theater with me to see this movie actually got up and left. And it was during this scene in particular. But it just goes to show how effective the practical effects in this film really are. Next, we have Mateo's trap, aka the brain. I don't know what timing Jigsaw was on, but dude, this was the gnarliest trap, I think, in the entire franchise. Mateo, again, gets the magic 3 minutes. This time, to cut open his own skull and scoop out a section of his own brain. But uh-oh, better make sure you scooped out a large enough section of your own brain or it won't matter. Because, as we see here, Mateo goes through with this but fails to get a big enough portion of his brain on the scale before the time runs out. Yeah, not gonna sugarcoat it. This has gotta be another absolute bogus from me. Next is Gabriella's trap. Poor Gabriella, who really shouldn't even be there. I mean, he doesn't even get close to going easy on her either. But apparently she's a bit of a drug addict, so I guess that's par for the course for Jigsaw victims. Gabriella gets lifted 15 feet in the air and then is blasted by a giant radiation laser beam. Her options are to use a hammer to either break her wrist or break her ankle in order to try to get out of the path of the beam. And Cecilia, the most evil cat-stroking villain I've ever seen, tells her to break her leg so that she can swing out of the way. And for some reason, she listens. Then we get this almost comedic bit where the radiation machine slowly turns in order to start spraying her with radiation again. Even John is like, oh Jesus. Okay, so even if she breaks her wrist and plummets 15 feet to the ground and lives, she was still pelted with some of the most focused radiation imaginable. I mean, that's gotta cut into any lifespan she was gonna have going forward, right? Now, she obviously needs medical attention, which John points out. But Cecilia escapes with the help of her boyfriend Parker and stops them from getting her any help. The thing is, John planned for this to happen. He should have known that they would be held up pretty long finishing the game after Gabriella's trap. So I really don't feel like he set up Gabriella in any way that she would likely survive. Because of all that, we're going 3 for 3 on absolute bogus. The final game of Saw X is your classic convoluted Saw ending, in which everything the characters did played exactly into Jigsaw's hand and how he planned it out from beginning to end. So here, John's plan was to let Parker free Cecilia, and for the evil Cecilia to ultimately decide to put him into his own trap. And dude, I just have to say, Cecilia is one of, if not the most iconic Saw villain for me now. She's just so over the top and hateable, and the actress just chews up the scenery. I love her line where she's like,
"New game. It's called We Live, You Die, Fuck You."
And some of her chirps at Kramer just had me smiling.
I'd like to play a game.
Anyway, John's plan was for Cecilia to put him and Amanda into the trap, where they get bloodboarded. Insane. Of course, this doesn't go to plan as they decide to put the innocent child Carlos in Amanda's place. And when the two lovebirds go to get their money, this would release John from the trap and also triggering the room to be locked and filled up with poison gas while there's only one hole to breathe clean air through, forcing these two to fight to the death essentially. There's obviously so much that could have gone wrong with this plan. Like, what if they just waited to see what happened at the end of the bloodboarding trap instead of immediately going to get the money? But despite all that, my real problem with this was that out of everyone's trap, Cecilia got off the easiest by far, even though she was the most responsible for the scam. Not only did she get to torture John, but all she had to do was kill someone to win her trap, which she obviously had no qualms doing. So she really didn't get tested at all. I feel like her test should have been to not play into exactly what John thought she was gonna do. So when she put him in the trap and then went to go get the money, that should have been game over. Anyways, we're left with this happy ending walk into the sunset, which is just hilarious. After all that, we did it. We're good, Carlos, right? I didn't directly cause the most horrible trauma that you could have ever experienced in your entire life. So looking back, Cecilia's trap essentially boiled down to overpowering another person. And compared to what everyone else went through, that makes her trap the easiest, besides the dream sequence eyeball trap. And that wraps up my Saw Trap series. Thank you so much to anyone who is still watching this. I appreciate you guys so much. Hey, we just hit 30K on the channel, which is just absolutely surreal. So thank you guys. Please let me know what else you want to see on this channel. I have a lot of ideas, but I want to see what you guys are thinking. Because hey, we're only getting started. Thank you to these patrons. On Patreon, I do little vlogs. You get videos early, you get a shout out at the end of the video, all that stuff. And it helps me maybe keep doing this. If you guys want to support me on the Patreon, it's in the description. Bye, kisses. See you around. I love you, and game over.